Hi, my name is Kelly Abeln, and I'm sharing a presentation all about graphic memoirs. I was a 2020 recipient of an Artist Initiative grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board to work on my own graphic memoir about growing up caring for my disabled mom. I've read too many graphic memoirs to count, and in 2020 I took a graphic memoir workshop through the Center for Cartoon Studies. Graphic memoirs are a subgenre of graphic novels, so a lot of this information applies to graphic novels as well. This will be an overview of the genre of graphic memoirs with lots of book recommendations, and I'll break down the elements that make up a graphic memoir. If you enjoy reading graphic memoirs or considering making one of your own, this presentation is for you. Memoir is different from autobiography. Many comic artists use the term autobiocomics, meaning comics about their life, but as a whole book, it's more commonly labeled memoir instead of autobiography. A memoir and an autobiography are both first person accounts of what happened, but memoir usually focuses on a subject or theme. An autobiography attempts to summarize the person's whole life or a specific period of time. In memoir, the author doesn't need to be famous. Readers are drawn to the subject, like mental illness, breast cancer, coming out, and or the author's voice and in the case of graphic memoirs, art style. In autobiography, readers are drawn to the author, like rock stars, politicians, athletes, and historical figures. Memoirs often flash back and forth in time, and autobiographies generally are in chronological order. In memoir, the author usually highlights an emotional experience, and universal themes like love, loss, redemption, or coming of age. Autobiographies tend to focus on facts and events with historical significance, all with the author's perspective. So in Eat, Pray, Love, Elizabeth Gilbert shares her journey trying to discover herself while traveling after a divorce. People can relate to the universal journey of self-discovery through reading about her specific experience. So that's an example of memoir. In Obama's latest book, he details what happened during his 8 years of presidency with factual historical stuff with his personal perspective. So that is an example of an autobiography. Now that we're clear on what a memoir is, a graphic memoir combines words and images to tell the author's story. A graphic memoir would be in the same category as a nonfiction graphic novel. Before people started using the term graphic memoirs, there were comic artists doing serialized autobio comics, like Harvey Pekar, who was a working class guy in Cleveland who wrote about the mundane aspects of his life in an interesting way, and comic artists like Robert Crumb would illustrate them. Pekar's work wouldn't technically fit in the definition of graphic memoir since the author isn't the artist, but there are many titles in the graphic memoir genre that don't perfectly fit the description. At the end of the day, if you're reading a book with words and pictures about someone's real life, it could be considered a graphic memoir. The artwork on the right is from the book Blankets by Craig Thompson, which was billed as a, quote, semi-autobiographical illustrated novel, and is often on graphic memoir lists, even though the author took some liberties and it's not 100% truthful, it's semi-autobiographical. Both of these books have traditional comic book art style that you might expect from a graphic novel. Today, there are lots of newcomers to the graphic memoir genre, and they don't all come from a comics or art background. In Good Talk by Mira Jacob, she uses photos and drawings in a collage style. Hyperbole and a Half started as a webcomic by Ali Brosh and is famous for its naive MS Paint art style and is beloved for its honest storytelling and humor. I included these to show many different styles of art can be used in graphic memoirs. Mouse by Art Spiegelman is considered to be the first graphic memoir and one of the best graphic novels. In Mouse, Spiegelman tells a story of his father's experience as a survivor of the Holocaust and how that affected his relationship with him. Spiegelman was active in the underground alternative comic scene and started Mouse as a serialized comic. He spent 10 years making Mouse, and it was published in 2 volumes. He received lots of rejection letters trying to get it published. It was the first time comics, memoir, and history were combined in this way. It was the first and only graphic novel to win a Pulitzer Prize. Spiegelman depicted Nazis as cats, Jewish people as mice, and Polish people as pigs. This technique helped to distance characters from the real people they represented. In 1980, when Mouse was first published, comics were seen mostly as a medium for children. This quote shows some of the criticism Spiegelman got. Quote, "Don't you think a comic book about Auschwitz is in bad taste?" one angry reporter asked him when the book was published in Germany. "No," Spiegelman replied, "I thought Auschwitz was in bad taste." The success of Mouse really made way for comics to be taken seriously as a form of literature. Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, published in 2006, is up there with Mouse as one of the best graphic memoirs. Bechdel was making serialized shorter comics for years before starting this book. It's about her childhood growing up in rural Pennsylvania at a funeral home and her complex relationship with her dad. I won't spoil anything if you haven't read it, but it has themes of sexual identity, gender, suicide, and family. Fun Home took 7 years to make and was adapted into a Broadway musical, and there's a film adaptation in production currently. Each chapter in Fun Home has a literary focus. Bechdel combined comics, memoir, and literature in a unique way. Here's a quote from Bechdel. "It is very important for me that people be able to read the images in the same kind of gradually unfolding way as they're reading the text. I don't like pictures that don't have information in them. I want pictures that you have to read, that you have to decode, that take time, that you can get lost in. Otherwise, what's the point?" This quote explains the relationship between text and images in a graphic memoir or novel. It's important that the images don't just repeat the text. Artists take advantage of the medium and use them to add to the story. Think about that the next time you're reading a graphic memoir or novel. Of course, you can breeze through and just read all the text, but try to go back and slow down and read the images and see what they're adding to the story. Now I'll share some examples of contemporary graphic memoirs. First up is Belonging by Nora Krug. Krug is a German-born illustrator who lives in America. In Belonging, she investigates her family's personal history with World War II and unpacks the emotional baggage that comes with it. This book has a very unique mix of words and pictures. Some pages are full-blown traditional comics, some have family photos, and some have photos of things she found at flea markets that reflect the time period she's talking about. She also included definitions of German things and traditions she was homesick for. Roz Chast you may know for her New Yorker cartoons, and this is her first memoir, titled Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant? It's about caring for her parents towards the end of their lives. She manages to find the funny parts in this depressing period, which are very relatable to anyone caregiving for elderly relatives. This is another example of a graphic memoir tackling tough subject matter through the approachable medium of comics. Diary of a Teenage Girl, An Account in Words and Pictures by Phoebe Glockner is about a teen girl in San Francisco in the 70s and her first love, who happens to be her mom's boyfriend. The book is told from a teen's point of view, but it's quite explicit and not marketed for young readers. It has some pages of text, some comics pages, and some full-page illustrations. Glockner has called it thinly veiled autobio, so it's not labeled as a memoir. It was made into a great movie. Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi is another well-known graphic memoir that was turned into a great animated movie. It's about the author's experience growing up during Iran's Islamic Revolution. This is a great example of illuminating historical time with a personal account. On her decision to make Persepolis in the graphic format, Satrapi said, quote, "Images are a way of writing. When you have the talent to be able to write and to draw, it seems a shame to choose only one. I think it's better to do both." Now I'll talk about a subgenre of graphic memoirs, young adult or YA, which basically means it's for and about young people, roughly from ages 12 to 18. An adult reflecting on their youth with the wisdom of an adult wouldn't quite fit YA. It's more often from the point of view of a young person. Often YA books are coming-of-age stories because the transition to becoming an adult and finding one's identity is a huge part of being a young person. These are a few examples of YA graphic memoirs. Almost American Girl by Robin Ha follows Ha's experience immigrating to America from Korea as a teen and trying to fit in. Dancing at the Pity Party by Tyler Fetter is about Fetter losing her mom to cancer while in college. Hey Kiddo by Jarrett Krosauka is about his experience growing up in a family grappling with addiction. So since YA is for ages 12 to 18 often has mentions of sex or drugs, for readers younger than that, ages 8 through 12, the category is called middle grade. You won't find swearing or adult themes, but probably some fart jokes. Here are some popular middle grade graphic novels that are based on the author's experiences. El Defo by C.C. Bell is a loose autobiography of her childhood living with deafness. She made the ironic choice of drawing herself as a bunny, saying, quote, "What are bunnies known for? Big ears, excellent hearing," end quote. New Kid by Jerry Craft is about a black middle schooler who transfers to a mostly white school and struggles with fitting in, and is based on Craft's life. Raina Telgemeier is sort of the pioneer of middle grade graphic novels. They're beloved by parents, teachers, and librarians because they lure in reluctant readers. She's made fiction books, including Babysitter's Club adaptations, and a series based on her own childhood that started with Smile and then Sisters and Guts. I will now go over the elements that make up a graphic memoir. These are things to think about if you're making a graphic memoir or just reading one. First, the topic. The topic or the theme of a graphic memoir can be anything, typically something the author has lots of personal experience with. On the left, there's a list of short summaries of some of the graphic memoirs I've featured in this presentation to show the diverse range of topics. Another way a topic can be addressed is in an anthology, which is a collection of short pieces by different authors on one theme. It gives readers a variety of perspectives on one topic. For example, Drawing Power is a comic anthology focused on the topic of women's stories of sexual violence, harassment, and survival. Story structure. In fiction writing, there are lots of rules and devices to craft a compelling narrative. Often stories follow the structure of inciting incidents, rising action, climax, and resolution. Real life isn't that neat, so often memoirs don't follow such a strict structure. Usually the main character or narrator grows or changes in some way by the end of the book. The art on the right is from Hot Comb by Ebony Flowers. It is a collection of comics, some autobiographical and some fiction. Linda Berry described them as, quote, complex stories about the ordinary lives of Black girls, end quote. This is another way a graphic memoir can be structured, in a collection of short stories. Character design is a huge topic, but here are some things especially important in graphic memoirs. If a memoir spans years or decades, the character design needs to age subtly but noticeably. You still need to recognize that it's the same character aging. In this example from Susceptible by Genevieve Castries, is her character aging from a small child to a young teen to a full-blown teen. And there's certain markers like her hair that you can recognize throughout, but you can also tell that she's gradually aging. It's important that readers can identify different characters quickly. This is done with distinguishing features like hair, age, height, clothes, and expressions. These all tell the readers things about the character. Sometimes artists exaggerate features to highlight characters' personality. A strict person may have sharper features, and a gentler person may be more round and soft. In this example on the left from Persepolis, you can see each person has different features. Even though it's very simplified art and only in black and white, you can distinguish each character from each other. On the right, you can see an example from Maya Kobabe from her graphic memoir, Genderqueer. And she has a breakdown in the beginning of the book of characters in the book, like her dad and mom, with all their characteristics labeled. Another important aspect in graphic memoir is how to show time passing, or flashing back and forth. In the example on the left from American Born Chinese, it shows flashbacks with blurry edges. On the right, from The Best We Could Do by T. Bui, you can see the unique way the author and artist shows someone sharing a memory. The place or setting in graphic memoirs is often defined by what the artist chooses to include and chooses not to include. All the details determine the vibe of the setting. On the left, in The Best We Could Do, the sparse apartment and smoking dad fit with the vibe of the scene, which is very solemn. The lack of details says a lot here. In contrast, on the right, a panel from Julia Wirtz shows a cozy childhood reading nook with lots of details included. In the writing world, the term voice means the style of writing. For example, David Sedaris has a very humorous writing voice. In comics, the narrator has a voice and each character has a voice. Different voices are shown by using different grammar, accents, and sentence structure. Good comic dialogue reads like how people actually talk. In the example on the left, M.S. Harkness, the author, uses slang, pauses, non-words like and it reads very authentically. A master of capturing authentic voice is the great Linda Berry. The example on the right is from her semi-autobiographical comic series called The Greatest of Marlis, and it shows the character of Marlis, an 8-year-old, singing and talking about how much she likes cold hot dogs. Imagine how an 8-year-old would talk about cold hot dogs versus a 40-year-old. It would be very different. In this example from Guts by Raina Telgemeier, it shows the interior thoughts and narration that you can use in a memoir. It lets the reader feel what the author was feeling and what they chose to share. In this example, you can see that the character is thinking tons of things and feeling tons of things, but simply says, I don't know. I think we can all relate to that, to thinking one thing and doing or saying something else. Also notice all the sensory details the artist included here. That really adds to the understanding of the motion in the scene. One more example here from Tilly Walden's book Spinning. I love how her coming out moment is written. It's not perfect. She sort of stumbles over the words. It really feels like how a 13-year-old would say it. Graphic memoirs and graphic novels in general seem to be on the upswing. More are being published and read and considered as literature each year. The YA category seems to be growing the most. I think because publishers, parents, and teachers want to encourage a love of reading in young people, and books with pictures are fun to read. We all start reading picture books, then move on to chapter books with some pictures, and then graduate to quote unquote real literature with no pictures. I think graphic novels are becoming considered real books for adults with pictures. The medium of graphic memoirs is so intimate and is perfect for marginalized voices who may have been ignored. The comics medium is accessible and helps educate people and create more empathy. I hope the growth in the medium leads to more graphic memoirs from BIPOC creators who haven't been represented. Also, personally, this year I completed my pitch packet for my graphic memoir and am working on finding a publisher. Thanks for listening.